Stitchless TV. Today we are going to make this fantastic cropped 60s style jacket. The first thing that we need to do is we need to attach our sleeve to our back piece. Now when we sew fur, it's not straightforward. It's very important that we match up our notches. So I've got my notch on my sleeve and my notch on my back piece. So I'm making sure that they're lined up. I'm pushing all the lovely fur in, and I'm actually going to use a zigzag stitch right on the edge. So let's see. Okay, so when you do your zigzag, okay, I've got it on C and on number 2 because the zigzag needs to be really close together and yet big enough to capture the fabric. So I've got it on and off, coming on and on, off, just like an overcast stitch. And then as I go along, I'm matching up all of my chalked out marks, and every now and again I'm having to adjust the foot just to sort of take away some of the bulk. I'm pushing all of the fur in as I sew. Now the reason why I'm making such a big fuss about all of this is because if you sew fur properly, you shouldn't really be able to see the seam. It just sort of gets lost in all the fur. Just keep going all the way around until you get to the end of the raglan sleeve. So that's what we end up with, and I guess because it's quite a short part we can see the seam, and also it's going in different directions, isn't it? But it looks very, very neat. So just do exactly the same on the other side. So that's what we've got so far. So now what we have to do is we just need to close off the darts. These are the shoulder darts. So we just do exactly the same type of stitch, pushing in all of the fur and zigzagging the edge. So do it on the left side and then do it on the other side as well. So I've stitched up the, oh, I've got fluff in my eye. I've stitched up the shoulder dart. Now what I would say is, because we're not doing a seam allowance, don't finish exactly, can you see that? Don't finish exactly where the dart finishes. You need to sort of zigzag and graduate it down into nothing so that it ends up being a nice smooth curve. Okay, so now we're going to add one of our fronts onto the sleeve. So remember, fabric always right sides together. I'm going to line up the armpit of the sleeve of the top, and then as we sew we match up all of our notches and just do that same zigzag stitch, and then do the same to the other front as well. So I'm tucking all of the fur, all of the, yeah, alright. Oh, so remember, you've got to tuck in all those fluffy bits of fur. Now I just want you to have a little bit of a look at the front facing here. Because do you remember me saying we use the same pattern for the front and the back, and then afterwards we go in and we shape the front neck, because front necks normally come down a little bit more than at the back. So what we're going to have to do now is to cut out that sort of shape. So I want my neck to go down like that, but because it's the facing that I have here, I then need to mirror it there. So I'm going to cut that out now with a scalpel. Pretty good, eh? But I'm going to have 3/4 length sleeves, so my sleeves will be up there. Now what I'm looking at are things like this, see there? So I just need to smooth that off a little bit, but I might be able to do that when I stitch on the lining. So you see where I think I'm in the right place, where the seams join there, they sort of poke up. So you can trim it back now or just sort of incorporate it when you do the lining. But what I am thinking about is if I feel that the neck is a little bit wide. So I've just chalked out where I'm just going to nip in the back a little bit just to pull it in. So still on the zigzag stitch, about less than a centimetre really, zigzagging and just going off into nothing because it's a dart, and then backwards and forwards, and then I'll do it to the other line as well. Just, it doesn't look like much, but overall it will just bring in the neck a little bit. Now, you know that funny little bit there? I'm just trimming it off. I'm just smoothing it off, making it into a nice smooth curve. And I'm using the scissors for this bit and just cutting it carefully. So shake off the fur. Now, we're just going to piece together all the lining pieces in the same way as we did the coat. So I'm going to start with my back piece. Where are you, back piece? So I'm going to start with my back piece. Remember, we put our fabrics right sides together. I'm going to get one of my sleeves, line up my notches. So I want you to use as small a seam allowance as possible. And you're using a straight stitch now. So on this JL machine, it's A and it's about a size 3. So I'm going to stitch down the raglan sleeve and underneath the armpit, attaching the sleeve onto the back. Backs and forwards to begin with, line up all the notches. Oh, what a pleasure it is to sew a normal material. We'll have this lining done in minutes. So we've attached one on, just do the same on the other side as well. Both of our sleeves are stitched onto the back. Now we're just going to do the dart that forms the shoulder on the sleeve. So remember, as small a seam allowance as you can, like half a centimetre or something, using a straight stitch. So now we're going to attach our sleeves onto our front lining pieces. Always remember to put them on right sides together. And then same on the other side as well. I've just remembered about my darts that appeared at the back of the jacket, so I need to have some little darts at the back on my lining. So I'm just going to quickly do those now before we do anything else. Actually, that's a really nice jacket. Look at that, that's a nice jacket. Wow. Okay, now when you've done all of that, you then need to press it. So give it a good old press. We're now going to attach our lining to our coat. So you've got to concentrate. Have a look at this. So I've got my lining right sides. So this is my front lining. That's my front piece of jacket. That's that extra piece that was going to be folded back for the facing. Okay. Now I'm going to attach it so it goes right up to the top. And I'm pushing in all of the fur. Now I'm going to attach it with a zigzag, pushing all the fur in as you go. Partly because I don't quite know how we're going to finish off yet, but also because it's not time yet. I want you to stop about 2 inches, 3 inches away from the end of the lining. So with your lining right sides together with your fur, always, look. Now you're just going to do exactly the same but on the other side using that zigzag stitch. Making it match up with the top but stopping 2 or 3 inches away from the edge. Now that we've done both of those seams, attaching the lining to the actual jacket, we're going to start lining up some seams. And we're going to start attaching it around the neck. Now what I would say about that is it's all about lining up the seams properly. So line up the shoulder seam of the lining with the shoulder seam of the coat, the seam of the back with the seam on the lining. So just decide where you're going to start. And I think a good place to start is the sleeve, raglan sleeve of the back section. I'm starting where my raglan sleeve is attached onto the back of the jacket. And I'm doing that whole zigzag thing again, and I'm making sure that everything is lined up. So the dart with the dart of the lining. And if it looks like it's not fitting, then I can always ease it in a little bit. And then if you can't wait to see what that looks like that, but it does need to be pressed. So when you open it out, you see your gorgeous lining and your lovely facing. This will all be pressed back, like that. So we go back inside again, because we've got to do the same on the other side. Now, remember, we're not starting at the actual back of the jacket. We're starting at where the raglan sleeve is attached onto that back section. And we're just leaving this empty at the moment because we're going to deal with it at the end. So I'm matching up the raglan sleeve of the lining with the raglan sleeve of the back, and that's my starting point, and I'm working my way round to the front. So we're left with that little section. I think because I went a bit overboard with my darts here. Do you remember we made it a bit bigger? The lining, we stood it away from the edge so it was a bit bigger so we could have a pleat. Well, I think I've taken too much on my darts, so we don't need to do that now. It looks like it fits perfectly. So just do the zigzag stitch and close it off. When we flop it over, it should all be really neat. But we're going to have to press it all. Now, sometimes if you've got a lot of bulk underneath, you might need to snip into curves. But because we've done this with the fur and I've done the zigzag stitch, there shouldn't be a lot of bulk there. So I'm just going to give it a good old press with an iron. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Now that we've attached it around the neck and we've attached it part of the way down the facing, it's time now to close off all our side seams and start looking at the hem of the sleeves. Sewing from the armpit going down, and then you're going to sew from the armpit going down the sleeve using the zigzag stitch. So when you've stitched up the side seam from the armpit down to the side seam, you're going to sew from the armpit down to the end of the sleeve. Now you're probably wondering, why is it that we don't do it all in one shot? And the reason is, if you do it all in one go, because of the way the pile of the fur moves, whether you're using pins or not, you'll find that the armpits won't be aligned, and that's a very important point, to be lined up properly. That's all done. Stitched up the sleeve, stitched up the side seam. Now you're going to do exactly the same on the lining that is on the same side as the coat, except you're just going to use a straight stitch. So put that back to A, put it around 3, and a really small seam allowance. Right, we're getting there. So I'm going to now do this thing called bagging out. I want to bag out, hello, where are you? I want to aim to bag out this lining with the jacket. Now you're going to have to really concentrate because it's going to hurt your head. So that's the jacket, that's the sleeve, and there's the lining coming out. What we need to do is we need to really make sure that the lining seam lines up perfectly with the seam of the jacket, and then I'm holding on to it so that I know it's in the right position, and I've just pushed it through there, through the coat, and then I'm going to get a good grip on it all, pull that sleeve through, and I'm going to start sewing all the way around that sleeve. We use a zigzag stitch for that. As you get about halfway round, have a little check and see how everything's fitting, because now's your time when you could stretch things or ease things in a little bit. But mine seems to be fitting really well. It's just because when you're using different fabrics, even though you might think that you've cut them the same size, as if by magic they can sort of feel like they've changed in size. So Scary Twisted Mess becomes beautifully bagged out, I knew it would, beautifully bagged out sleeve. Look at that. So in there is a perfectly finished off, lined sleeve. So my hem is going to be about 1.5 inches, something like that. 1.5 inches, it looks more because of the fluff. So in order for it to be 1.5 inches, the first thing that I need to do is I need to turn my facing the other way round. So for the facing, what happens is we turn it right sides together and we stitch it with that zigzag stitch really closely, and then we turn it the right way round, okay, and this gets attached to it. So when you're cutting your step, you don't cut it right up to the edge of that facing. You need to have it in by about 1 centimetre, because we need something to grab when we're actually doing the hem. Now I forgot to say, when you do reshape your hem, whatever you do to your hem, you have to also do to the lining. So I've also taken off my lining the same as I did for my hem. So I'm just going to stitch this facing together. So I'm going to fold it right sides together, and I'm going to take notice of where I made that mark with the pen, which signified the fold, and that will be my starting place. So I've got to push all this fur inside, so when I do the zigzag stitch, it's just going to be on the edge. So when you get to that bit, then just take it off. And remember to do the same on the other side. So we have this bit of raw edge here, which later on we will tuck in and we'll deal with it. But at the moment, what we have to do is we're folding up our hem, lining up our side seam. So when you gather it up, it means that it just fits the hem fits much better into the space. So I've opened up the side seam, and that's where I'm going to be working when I work on the inside of the jacket. So what I'm going to do to start with, I'm going to get the side seams. Look, I've got my hand inside, I'm grabbing that side seam, and I'm going to start pulling it through the hole. This is the line, this is the bit of facing, so that's the facing that goes back to the lining. Okay, now what I'm doing is I'm keeping it in line with the facing, I'm pushing down the lining so it forms a little pleat, and then I'm just stitching along there, so I'm trapping that little pleat of lining. Now look, I have to confess that when I did go inside and do this hem, I did actually have to use pins. What I did was I went around halfway through the hem, all the way around, and I put the pins quite close together so that when I went inside, because you have to sort of turn it inside out, and then when I went inside, it meant that it was easier for me, because actually what I did do, I ended up stitching it all the way around, because just putting little stay stitches here and there, it still wasn't sitting right. If you decide to have a go at making your fur jacket, I love to see your results, so post them on my Facebook page. Thank you so much for watching Stitchless TV. See you again soon. Bye.